Hello, it is Aaron Lelito here with a Wild Roof podcast episode. And today our guest is Rachel Turney, who was featured in the summer issue number 30 of Wild Roof Journal. And before we get into things, I'll give the quick intro and start our conversation with Rachel. Rachel is an educator and artist based in Denver. Her poems, research articles, reviews, and drawings can be found in a variety of publications. She's passionate about immigrant rights, teacher support, and empowering other artists. She is a Writer's Hour Prize winner and Best of the Net nominee. And Rachel also runs the online reading series called Poetry in Brief. She is on staff at Bareback Magazine with her monthly column Friday Night in the Suburbs. She also reads for the Los Angeles Review. And we'll talk a little bit about some of Rachel's upcoming releases, namely Record Player Life, the B-side, which will be coming out in January, and Retired Wannabe Club Kid, which is scheduled for release in April. So welcome, Rachel. Nice to talk with you today.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks for having me.
Sure thing. So, just to get a little bit of your background, the who you are and why are you here question. Yeah, well, how did you get into writing? You can go like formative writing experiences, or even kind of your current motivations to develop these new releases, whichever one you want to pick to start with.
Yeah, I've actually been really thinking about that because I started writing very young, kind of as we all did in elementary school with little stories that, of course, my third grade teacher said were wonderful and you should be a writer. And, in there with the little typewriter and stuff. And then I was a paid writer actually in my 20s for New City Magazine in Chicago doing art reviews. And I think that's probably the only time I've been paid for my writing. And then I kind of stepped away from that and did some other things, and I just never went back to writing. I guess it didn't feel like it was going somewhere at the time. So I didn't really get back into it until recently because I had kind of a COVID life experience of taking a year off. I guess a lot of people did, but I ended up doing some traveling and I had a lot of time to write. It was the first time I hadn't worked since I was like 14 years old. So I had time to really focus on that. And then I was like, I want to keep this going. And I thought I'll submit to like one or two literary magazines. And if somebody accepts my work, then maybe that'll like make me feel like, oh, okay, this has value. And then here I am 2 years later. So I started that in 2024. And now I have some collections that people accepted. So that was super exciting. So I definitely built up my confidence by engaging with literary magazines. And so that's why it's so nice to talk to you because, EICs are part of the reason that authors are really here to begin with.
Yeah, awesome. Even if you could add on to that time, like that COVID-ish time where you picked up writing again, like what did that look like? Was it just something like in your kind of notebook kind of stuff? Was it something that was more intentionally to like come up with something more polished? Was it just intuitive? Anything like that?
Yeah, I took a sketchbook down with me I went to Roatan, Honduras, right when they reopened. And I was able to get both of my COVID shots early because at the time I was going into elementary schools as a student teacher supervisor. So I was kind of at the top of the line. So I went down when they opened and nobody was there because it's a cruise ship port and none of the cruise ships were coming. And so I found a very, cheap place to stay because nobody was down there. And I took a sketchbook and I just like did some drawing. And I thought maybe I'll get into some form of art during this time that I have. Did some drawing, did some writing, and I started taking photographs then too, which is actually what I submitted to you, a photograph, not from then, but that I took in Germany actually. And so it was just a time to think and just really have time to do things creatively that I just hadn't spent time on before because I was very busy with work and I was putting a lot of value into my work and education, which was also, a good use of time. Just didn't leave a lot of room for creativity. I didn't want to read or write when I got home because that's what my job was.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, sure. You mentioned your entry point was to submit to some literary magazines and kind of see what happened, like check out, does anybody does anybody like this stuff or connect with it? So what was your like entry point or your knowledge level going in? Was it something you were already familiar with, or was it a new, more or less a new experience to learn about the lit mag world when you did?
Yes, I've learned so much. So when I started, I knew about zines because I had some friends who were into zines when I was a teenager. And I had a couple, actually, one of them is Elsewhere Place, which is still around. I had one that I bought at a market in Berlin when I was like in my 20s. And I still had it and I submitted to them and they accepted some of my photographs. So that was pretty cool to like come around. And so I knew they existed, but I don't know why it was never on my radar. I hadn't spent a lot of time reading them or thinking, oh, I could write for one of them too. These are regular people out there in the world submitting. And I don't think that really hit home to me that, like, oh, I could also do that. I could give that a try. So I don't know why it just never like crossed my mind that, oh, maybe I could be involved.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, it does seem like just something other people do until you push on it a little bit and learn like the submission process and actually dive in a little bit. So
Mhm.
yeah, you mentioned that you had some feedback initially that was positive in the sense of getting accepted relatively early in early stages. So that provided some encouragement. We could talk a little bit about the upcoming book. It may be out now, and when now when this is released and available um, in January. So it's called Record Player Life: The B-Sides. What's the concept behind it, or what was kind of the origin story of that collection?
So this is a strange collection because I actually had really strong themes for some of the other things I was working on, and I started to put them together. And one is going to be a woman, which is coming out with Red Rose Thorns in May. And that was my kind of like magnum opus collection that I was like, this is what I want to say, and this is what I want to be about this feminist journey. And so I had that going. I have one that's about my family, which I don't think they're going to like very much. And that's still in edits. And I'll have to decide if I ever want to put that out because that could have consequences. And then I started writing Retired Wannabe Club Kid. My family here makes fun of me, my stepdaughter and my husband, because I would be cooking breakfast, wearing headphones, listening to EDM, and typing this. And they said, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm writing like EDM poetry." And they're like, "Why you're making breakfast?" I was like, "Yes." And then so I kind of started categorizing things, and I had like a body of work that was some shorts, really they're nonfiction, and then even some fiction pieces and some poetry. And the theme just didn't really reveal itself. And I thought, well, maybe this is my B-side book. It's not like super commercial, popular on a theme. It's like my little pieces of disarray, which was the original title, In Complete Disarray. But there is, when you look at something, there's always a theme comes through. And I think the theme is living in a community and interactions with other people. And I would say that that is kind of the theme of the book.
Yes, I like that kind of record concept. Can you say more about that aspect of the theme and like were there certain poems that like that kind of clicked for you and it spiraled from there or something in the writing process that you really grabbed onto?
Well, it has a titular poem in there, Record Player Life. And I wrote that the day that I got a record player, which I'd never owned one before, and I have one now. And then I got these old records from my father-in-law. And so I started getting interested in it a little bit. And that's when I kind of read about the concept of the B-side. So it was kind of all taking place at the same time, which is really what this collection is about. It's just kind of about daily life and how we feel and how we interact with space and time around us and our feelings about things. And it's kind of a pause, which is something I try to bring to a lot of my work, just to tell people to like, hey, slow down and notice what's around you because it's all really beautiful and we should spend more time archiving it. And that's what I'm trying to do, I think, with this collection.
Yeah, I'll come back to that in a second. But yeah, what were the inheriting, whether it's books or albums or, whatever media it takes, however it takes shape is interesting. So like what was the music that you mentioned like, inheriting?
Oh, there's some really weird stuff in there and things I've never heard of and a lot of things I don't care for. So I'm starting to add I'm starting to add my own records and I've been listening to basically the same five bands since I was 11 years old. So we got your Cranberries, some Bjork, Radiohead. And that's about it.
I get stuck in that loop too, in terms of like, I don't know if there's anybody who's been new in the past 10 years that I am like got really into or familiar with. But yeah, I definitely am familiar with that era. So if I can like listen to Pavement forever, like I'll probably just like sign up for that. Like, why do we need new stuff? Um, yeah, but then it is fun to kind of see the weird stuff that is out there. Like I was at a
Mhm.
used vinyl sale or whatever not that long ago, and there's just so much unusual stuff and like even the album art, like 60s, 70s, there's just so much of like that tangible and tactile world that we are kind of losing a little bit of.
Yeah. Yeah. And Aaron, I think there's a lot to be said for listening to something the way the artist put it together, which we don't do anymore, right? We live a world on shuffle. And so it's really interesting to hear it the way it was intended, I think.
Yeah, I was always like an album person. That is one of like the frustrations with losing a grasp
Mm-hmm.
on like listening to music lately is like growing up, like adolescence and stuff. I would just always like I would be obsessed that like it's the full like I would sit down and listen to the full album, and
Yeah.
it would just be my own mental necessity of like you have to. There's no other option.
Yeah.
Um, So yeah, I just learned an appreciation for that as well. So yeah, it's clearly a crossover with kind of literary pursuits and books and collections that we put together. There's a lot of parallels there as well.
Agreed.
But yeah, then you mentioned like the kind of the archival aspect of writing, and that's interesting in itself because you said that some of your poems maybe deal with family or people that, if they read it, maybe it's not as flattering as it, as they'd like it to be, or something like that. So like how do you navigate it, or how have you kind of wrapped your head around it so far in terms of putting something maybe out there that could be a little sensitive or revealing.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually have that situation now. One of my friend's husbands has cancer, and I wrote some poems about that. And they are in record player life. And I'm actually not really sure that he's like ready to see those come out. So I have been thinking about that a little bit. And then I've written a couple things about friends that I showed it to them and they were like, oh. And they were like, that's fine, I guess. And they're like, but that's not how it really is. So I've put some notes and I said, my friend wants me to say that this is how this really is, you know. And when I showed, I had a couple pieces come out about my family that, you know, probably weren't the most flattering, but that are true. And, you know, my dad said, I don't remember it that way. I said, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I think a lot of people, a lot of writers like have to, have to navigate that, like I said. So it is obviously it is personal and unique to everybody because the people involved are individual, but the sharing of it and asking them like kind of you get what you get. And then as the writer, you're comfortable or not with putting it out there.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then yeah, that back to kind of the archive ideas, like you can look back on it, years down the road, you can look back on it
And probably
and
cringe.
possibly, yeah, possibly that's not how you yourself
Find a
remembered it.
typo.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. And you mentioned that the EDM music was the inspiration for the other collection, Retired Wannabe Club Kid. So that was your own experiences as a young person. I used the term wild child, but it kind of like in with a little bit of a wink. What was that era of your life, and how did it kind of relive itself now?
Yeah, I think, you know, I was very inspired by listening to kind of like upbeat music, techno music, EDM, house, which I listen to a lot when I work and write. And I got really good headphones now, so I've been jamming out. And I just started writing kind of my own lyrics. You know, so like Rufus to Soul, Diplo, call me if you want to work on a project together. And I started writing what I considered to be lyrics. And then they kind of took shape that they started kind of chronicling my life in a sense. And I was like, oh, I think I really wrote an autobiography in EDM lyrics. And I was like, okay, well, maybe somebody would be interested in that. And it has a message, you know, it has a message that, like, if you were one of these weirdo kids, or, you know, this term, wild child, which I actually talk about in my book, um, like that didn't fit in and that didn't find place and that was misunderstood, like that there is a whole community of people like that. And we can find each other in the night.
Yeah. And as an adult, that community is lit mags, as it turns out.
That's really funny, Aaron.
But well, it's yeah, personal experience, I suppose, in my life. Um, yeah, but I mean that gets right to it, is that kind of that feeling of being misunderstood and wanting to be acknowledged, validated.
Mhm.
That's why people put themselves out there in, creative ways and to get that kind of sense of community or belonging, or like I said, the
Yeah.
validation aspect of it.
Hmm.
Yeah, my ideas do mean something. Um, yeah, so maybe like that's a good entry point into your role in the reading series, Poetry in Brief. So then that's flipping it a little bit, because then you serve as the host, and then people come on in a group setting and then read something either they're working on or something that was published. I guess share a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. I really want to get more people to attend to really like honor the poets who are coming, you know, and it does take a lot of work, like, you know, running a podcast. It's a lot of work and preparation on my part. I would say I probably spend 20 to 30 hours a month on running Poetry in Brief, and I've only been doing it for 2 months, so we'll see how long we go with it. But this was an idea born, a wine-fueled idea, as many of my ideas, because I really hate reading. I really hate reading my work. I can't stand it. I don't know why, because my job is public speaking, basically, and always has been. And I don't like it. I cry. I get really emotional. I get very nervous. And I don't enjoy it at all. So I was like, how can I get out of that, basically? And I was like, I know, I'll run my own reading series and then I don't have to read, but I can still be part of the community and still provide a platform and still connect with other artists without having to do the yucky part that I don't want to do. So it was like sort of selfish and sort of not selfish that I came to poetry in brief. But the first one I thought, other than I was very nervous, went really well. I was really happy with it and with the readers I had, just like really amazing. People agreed to come, and I made a mistake because I invited 8 people and they all said yes. And I just assumed, oh, they're not going to come. They're going to say no. And it's just going to be me and Candace Kelsey, who I'm friendly with, and she's going to show up, and not even my mom's going to come, and then I'm just going to be in this room, and it's going to be so embarrassing. And then everybody said yes, which was really, really cool. And then one person couldn't make it for other obligations, but I was like, oh wow, people want to do this, and that's really exciting. And so I created it as an invitation. So I find people that I'm like, ooh, I'm really interested in this person and their work. And I think their work would fit this theme that I'm developing, or I develop a theme because I saw what they did. And so it's all theme based and they can read anything they want. I don't screen it, which so far has gone fine. And and it's short. So everybody reads 1 or 2 pieces only. And then we talk like a little bit because that's something I always wonder when I'm at a reading. Somebody reads something and I'm like, ooh, I want to know why they said that. And then you don't get that opportunity. So I wanted to provide a space for them to talk and for me to find out why. Why did you choose that piece today?
Yeah, so it's not quite the, poetry group feedback thing, but there is a conversational element there of like of an exchange back and forth. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting. Yeah, because people in attendance are likely, writers or something like that. So just that curiosity element and maybe the craft element too of like you did that or you took that kind of experience and did this with it or something like that. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting concept, and it goes to show you that there is a desire for people to share their work,
Mhm.
and then you do record these so they are available to view after the fact.
Yes, yes. I started a little YouTube channel and I have one video on there. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, exactly. So people can check out the readings, even if they don't attend live. So yeah, we'll link that as well, so people can check that out. If people do want to get involved, that's something that you throw an invite out there and people can attend.
yeah, I've been inviting people. A couple people reach out to me and and that's great too. Then I go read their work and I say, okay, I think I have a theme that would be nice because I do want to keep it
Yeah.
like that I matched the person kind of with the theme, or that something about their work spoke to me in some way that I thought they'd be a good fit, because you don't want to run a reading like I have a nature one coming up and I don't want it to be all through the female gaze talking about the moon, which if I went to a nature reading, that's probably what I would read about. So I'm trying to make sure that there's people who are going to talk about different things. And that's the hard part when you don't screen the poems. You're not exactly sure, but I feel like I get a really good sense of the artist and think, okay, I think these people are going to talk about this topic in different ways.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, there is like a little balancing act thing of like wanting to bring people in, but also wanting to be some kind of continuity and feeling like it is a good fit. Yeah, we could add a little bit of like the side question of like you put together these couple of collections, you're doing some writing, you're working in another field. How do you juggle all these different elements, whether it is just your own writing projects in that kind of in that bracket or like the other life things in a more expansive context? Do you have methods, strategies, ways you that have worked for you? Are you good at multitasking? Uh, something along those lines. So, like, how would you address that one?
Chaotically. I do it all chaotically, but I would say yes, I'm very good at multitasking. It's something that I learned maybe 15 years ago, 10 years ago. I actually have a reason why. Um, I was getting my doctorate, which really I just got to spite my father, to be honest. And I was getting my doctorate, and I was working full time as a teacher, and I was waitressing, and I had two boyfriends. And so I was very busy. I was training for a half marathon, and I was taking doctoral statistics, which was definitely outside of my what I was good at. And I went to the professor and I was like, I just can't, like, I'm really struggling in this class. And he sat down with me and he was like, okay, tell me everything that's going on in your life. And so I explained everything to him. I was like, this is what I'm doing. Sometimes I'm at the restaurant until midnight, and then I'm teaching at 8 a.m. and I don't have time for my dissertation. And you know, and he said, it sounds like you need to get up an hour earlier every day. And I did. I got up at 6 instead of 7, and I wrote and worked on my dissertation for an hour every day. And that's when I realized like the value of time and the little tiny bits of time we have in a day, and how you have to create space for the things you value. And so I've just really held on to that in life. And then when I find, oh, I'm stressed out, I look at what I'm spending my time on and I say, I need to get rid of television. I need to get rid of, whatever thing that I can take off my plate.
Interesting. Yeah. A lot of people don't consider the getting up earlier solution. And by
I
a lot
hadn't.
of people, I think I'm, talking about myself. Yeah, the larger point, yeah, there find a chunk of time, whatever it is that you can use and devote to something.
Mhm.
When you're more focused on the writing organization aspect, how do you map things out? Do you have an organizational strategy? I guess I asked that before, and you said chaotic. So does that carry over into like the writing process in terms of which poems fit where, ordering things, finding themes? Is that something that is a little more scattered or intuitive, as I guess a positive spin on that? Or do you have a method of like, color coding, spreadsheet organization, something there?
Yeah, I'm big in my Google Docs, got got a lot of those going. I think I have like 100 tabs open right now. Um, I try to set aside time every day to do writing related things. I don't always write poetry or create something, but I might send in a submission. Or now I'm working on marketing for the books, which has actually been the most time consuming of anything I've maybe ever done. And thinking about how do you share your work with other people? How would you engage other people in the work, especially because all four of the collections I have out right now have like a really strong message. So I feel like I really want to engage the right communities in reading those things and sharing with me and having this, kind of dialogue about them. So I do set aside time to write. I write, whatever I feel like, and then I try to place it into some document and collection that seems cohesive. And then from that, usually a little something is born, whether it's something that's born that somebody else wants to hold. That's we'll see. Because obviously I've had a lot of rejections and I have a lot of completed collections that aren't in press. So we'll just see how all of that goes. But I do have the four out now, and I have probably 10 others completed, actually. But I don't know, when those will ever see the light of day.
So you got a lot cooking for sure. Adding on there, like, have you found like a good avenue for kind of that marketing slash sharing, sharing your work? It's such a difficult thing for a lot of people being comfortable with it, number one, but then number two, like actually having people see what you're what you're doing and what you're either posting or releasing. Have you found
Yeah.
something that's worked, or you're kind of still in progress there?
I'm like a strong believer of you have to ask for things. Nobody cares about you but you. Like, you need to ask other people for things, and you shouldn't be afraid of doing that. And I think artists are afraid because of a lot of times inferiority, and I think especially female artists have this, I can't ask for this, I can't ask this person for this. And so I am leading the way and changing that. For example, I contacted you, Aaron, and said, will you help me? And look, here we are right now. So I actually think talking to EICs has been the most productive thing for me. Just reaching out and saying, hi, I was in your magazine and, could we work together? Could I help you with the project? Could you help me with the project? And, I've had a lot of really nice responses and gotten to know some really cool people from doing that. So that's the path that I'm on right now.
Yeah, I think there is a good point in there because like through the writing and submission and accepting and rejecting process, just through, the individual piece method, to get your footing with a larger collection, that does provide an opportunity to have these connection points. And sometimes maybe it's just a one and done, you get something published. Okay, cool. On to the next one that happens, and that's okay. But yeah, you might have a person to contact, a magazine, a website, you could check back in with and yeah, see what they're up to and kind of get their 2 cents in terms of what direction to go with the collection. Yeah, that's a good one. Just because yeah, you're already doing the hard work submitting, you're already going through that process and doing all the legwork there. So when you do have a success, file that away and go back to it and return to it. I'll ask you to read one of your poems, but before I do, is there anything else uh, you'd like to share, mention, anything else in your outside of writing life that is kind of relevant that informs where you're going with your writing in terms of like some of those themes or messages that you had mentioned?
I think it's really important to have a community. And I've really found that on Instagram. So for me, that's been a really positive place. I know that social media is not positive for everybody. For me, it's been super positive. It's something that I spend a lot of time with, and I've met a lot of really great people from being engaged there. And it's important to have people in your corner who want to help and support you. And you may not find that in your IRL. So you need to create that for yourself, I think, to be successful and to feel like good about what you're doing. It has to have that human connection, I think, for me. So I'd encourage people to do that. I have a 1% acceptance rate for my writing. For my photography, it's a little higher. And I think the barrier of entry is a little lower to get photography and visual art out. I think people get a lot less submissions of those. So I would encourage, writers to seek out other ways to express yourself if you're getting frustrated with the rejection loop. Because I do have more like a 14% acceptance for my visual art. And I looked at your secret meetings book with Ghost City. So are those photographs you took and then you put the words? That was cool.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was gonna jump in to agree with like the visual art angle if you're inclined out there to do something like that. Like that was how I snuck in, because like my own background was in literature, as like we mentioned before we started recording, being an English professor for many years. Um, but the first entry point that I found that I was like comfortable with and got that bit of like encouragement and success in terms of acceptances was like visual art or photography. Um, yeah, and there is like a little bit of a lower barrier just 'cause there's less people submitting it to things like literary magazines. So yeah, mathematically, it's a little more, a little more, easy to wrap your head around. For me personally, it was, it was almost like I was like tricking them. I don't know if that like totally makes sense, but in my mind, it's like if I get this accepted, like they don't know I'm not really like, visual artist. Like I'm really like, a literary person. It's softened like I wasn't supposed to get accepted. I guess is the point. It's like I wasn't supposed to get accepted because I'm not really a photographer. So I'm just kind of saying this with a little bit of self-deprecatingness, but like, yeah, it just makes it feel a little bit different. A different story now after years of doing it, then I'll, I'm kind of over that. But yeah, at the beginning, I definitely see your point there, and yeah, maybe switching the genre a little bit. So even, if it is something like taking a poem, making it like a quote, like a micro fiction or something like that, even just kind of changing the genre in your own head in your writing process. Then if you submit it as a fiction, it's like maybe maybe it is a fiction. So, you kind of do it, you do it first, and then it becomes the thing later.
Mhm.
And then yes, it works in reverse. If you're writing stories, like take something and make a poem out of it, and if you're not comfortable with it, it wasn't supposed to be a poem. I like that aspect. You mentioned the Secret Meetings chapbook with Ghost City. Yeah, that was just in the back of my mind. That was like how it all started, was like doing the text with the visuals. Like I said, that was the entry point. So doing that last year was just kind of a nice little refresh to like use, in that case, handwritten text that was overlaid with photos, like nature photos. So that
Mhm.
was just fun to do in a way because it's experimental and you don't know, which pages are going to fit with which pictures. And sometimes it's just like works the first time and hey, that lines up pretty nicely. And sometimes it's like tedious and like saving like 14 different copies of a photo just to try to get the right combo. But yeah, that's another way to vary the presentation. It is writing. In that case, it's notebook writing, so it's not polished in terms of like a final written product. But it's a way to present it in a different way and do something a little bit that's more experimental and a little more process based than writing a
Mhm.
finished poem. So yeah, there's lots of different ways to do it. And even in Wild Roof Journal, I always like the hybrid and text visual combos and different ways of presenting it, whether it's through more collage based and cut and paste and different things. So yeah, lots of different avenues. So would you like to read a poem to close us out?
I picked this one for you. It's not really a poem, it's a nonfiction. I picked this for you because I read that you're into meditation. Yes.
Yeah, that's another. It's like layers of an onion,
Okay, I'm not. And so maybe you can help me, but I wrote a story, a little short story about trying to meditate. So that's what I picked to read to you. Okay.
Awesome. Yeah, go for it.
Meditation. I turn on the app and try to relax. I breathe in deeply and close my eyes. I open one eye and look around. Where did all of this dust come from? I close that eye again. The practice is about flexing and unflexing each muscle of the body. We start with the big toe on the right foot. I open one eye again to peer at my feet. It needs to be painted, the nail on my big toe, I mean. The polish has chipped on one, two, looks like all of the toes. I listen to the meditation while I paint my nails, humming as I do so. My husband asked me how my practice went. I told him it was great, tranquil, and zen, and I show him my new purple toenail polish.
Well, that goes back to multitasking, doesn't it? Doesn't it? Yeah,
I tried, Aaron. I tried to be mindful.
I know. Well, as long as if it's one pointed attention, then you can kind of, so, that's one definition of mindfulness is one pointed attention. So it could be, doesn't necessarily need to be the breath, but even if it's, eating something, the flavor and the taste and the texture, that's at least a mindfulness approach rather than a meditation approach. But you can split hairs
Maybe I could do the
with
mindfulness
that.
then.
Yeah. Yeah. And attention's always there. So you always have the next opportunity, the next and the next and the next and the next. Thanks for reading that and sharing, what you did about your background and your upcoming releases and everything else. So I appreciate that. We'll have links to your Instagram and the Poetry in Brief YouTube page as well, so people can check out what you're doing there. Otherwise, it was great talking to you, and talk to everybody again soon.
Thank you so much, Aaron.